Hello everyone, this is Grandmaster Ankit Rajpara here. I welcome all of you to the special collaboration between Chess Neurons and ChessBase India. For this episode of Strategic Mastery series, I have taken all the positions from the important positional concept, Outpost. Now, if you know what an outpost is, please make a comment on this video. Now, I'll explain more about this concept as we do the positions. So, this is white to play here, and if you want to attempt this, please pause the video here and resume once you are ready with the move. So, for a square to be an outpost square, two conditions must be met. Number one, the square should be defended by our pawn, and number two, it should not be attacked by opponent's pawn. And in most cases, the outpost square is on the opponent side. But please remember the two things, that is a square that is defended by our own pawn, and second, it cannot be attacked by opponent's pawn. So can you try to figure it out if there is such a square in this position? Yeah, the e6 square is such a square, defended by our pawn and cannot be attacked by opponent's pawn. So what we should try to do? We should try to get a piece there, and in fact we can get a piece there, that is the knight. Now please remember that if there is an outpost square available, then you should try to bring the knight there. Why knight? Because it is a short range piece, so it takes a while to improve it further as compared to the bishop, queen or the rook. So if we get that knight on a stable square, then it will be easier for that knight to put pressure on opponent, and it will become difficult for the opponent to remove that particular piece from the stable square. So here we can just bring the knight to g5 and then knight to e6, and look at the power of that knight on e6. Not only just putting pressure on this bishop, stopping black from castling on the king side, stopping black from castling on the queen side. This is why if there is an outpost square, try to see if you can get your knight there. So this is what happened in this position, and white just got completely dominating position. Now let's go for the next position. So if you want to attempt this position, please pause the video here and resume once you are ready with the move. So in this position, as I can notice, white's down a pawn, but most likely what has happened is that black has actually captured this pawn. So we have some options of recapturing like this. We have some other option as well. But there is one thing that I notice, that this square is not being defended by black's pawns. So cannot be attacked by black's pawns, and is being defended by white's pawn. So this square has the potential of becoming an outpost square. So, oh yeah, I know this is an outpost square, so let's just bring the knight there. No, we should not rush like that, because what will happen is after capture, and the pawn will get on e5. Now we don't want the pawn to be there. We want a piece to be there to be most effective. So there is a piece that is stopping us from taking control of that outpost square, that is this knight. It's time to eliminate that knight. So, and then get our knight on the central outpost square, defended by the pawn, cannot be attacked by opponent's pawn with a tempo. Let's say if opponent goes something like queen e8, no problem, improving the other knight's position with a tempo. Bishop f7, the bishop got passive, improving the rook's position, and white has gotten clear activity, and look at that extremely strong knight on the central outpost square. Now let's go for the next position. So this is black to play here, and let's try to understand this further. By the way, if you want to attempt this position, please pause the video here and resume once you are ready with the move. Now we know that these positions are from the topic of outpost. So let's try to look for outpost squares. Can we say g4 is an outpost square? We can't, because f3, h3 can be played. See, you can say that h3 there will be queen takes h3, or f3 the king side will get weaker. That is that, but still technically not an outpost square. So e4 still not, because in some cases f3 can be played. So then there are actually no outpost squares available in this position. What? Then how is this position about the outpost squares? See, this is important thing. Not all the time the outpost square will be available to you. You will need to create the outpost square for yourself sometimes. And that's what we are doing in this position. We have this very instructive move e4 available. And what happens after that? Not only we gain some space on the king side, but more importantly, we create an outpost squares. So two outpost squares are created on f3 and on d3. So f3 to weaken the king side, to put pressure on the king side, d3 to also to put pressure on the queen side as well. So let's say if opponent is greedy and goes for these pawns, we are not worried. We'll centralize the knight, queen takes b6, f4, increasing the pressure on white's king side, getting the knight on the outpost square with a tempo. And then in this position, knight g5, what's the plan? To get that queen there. See, the queen is not in defense, white's queen is not doing anything. This is just too much. So let's say after e4, opponent is like, I'll try to go for certain exchanges. No problem at all. Knight e5, we can try to bring the knight either to f3 or d3, depending on what opponent does. So now we got the knight on d3. There can be at times idea of queen f3, and look at that extremely strong knight. Opponent can play something like rook d2, f4, pawn push, weaken your opponent's king side. Then if this, then rook e5. Even the rook joins the game. So knight on the outpost square restricts significant activity of the opponent. By the way, if rook a d1, then there is this nice tactic, knight f2 check, and then that rook will be in trouble. So that's something even white can't do. So white has extreme difficulties in activating their pieces, and look at our pieces. So at times outpost square might not be there, then we create one. So now let's go for the next position. So this is white to play here, and if you want to attempt this position, please pause the video here and resume once you are ready with the move. So let's try to understand this position a bit further. I like white's position. One of the biggest reasons is that 5 pawns of black out of 6 are on light squares. So what? So see, look at this bishop's activity, especially because of these 2 pawns as well. That bishop's activity has been restricted, and because of 5 pawns of black being on light squares, so the dark squares have gotten weaker. Now, if we focus out of those weak dark squares on a particularly weak dark square, we see that e5 is an outpost square. By the way, please remember that the closer the outpost square to the center, the more effective it is, because as I have discussed before, we are trying to, in most cases, put the knight there, and if the knight is in the center, then it will have the most impact. So now knight is on e5. So so e5 is an outpost square. So what should we try to do? Should we just, so of course, see, there are some problems with this. Maybe this pawn, maybe some discovery will be there, but why give up our central pawn for that? That doesn't seem, even if this pawn was not going, I would be a bit skeptical about such things, because now the outpost square is not there anymore. The pawn on e5 is there. We don't want the pawn for now. So in this, what we should try to do? We should try to eliminate this knight, because that is something that controls the outpost square. So we can play bishop b5. Now some of you would be like, wait. Are we actually ready to give up our bishop for opponent's knight? Aren't bishops better than the knights? It is, but not particularly in this position, because look at this bishop's activity. It's not that active, and because the center is stable, because the position is a bit more on the close side, so that's why the active knight, the knight on the outpost square, will be more effective than the bishop. So, and here if knight f6 happens, then just capture knight e5. White's clearly better due to the strong knight on e5. This restricted bishop is there. This is a backward pawn. It's better. Now, let's say if opponent is like, I won't exchange, I'll play knight e7. No problem at all. We can exchange, and then we can get the knight on the central outpost square with a tempo. But then some of you will be like, wait, you were just mentioning that black's bishop was bad. Why are we exchanging it? So we have a reason for that. So apart from getting a knight on the central outpost square, once this rook moves, we are able to get our rook on the 7th rank as well. So for these reasons, to get that knight on the outpost square, number 1, and number 2, to get that rook on the 7th rank, we actually exchange that not so active bishop of black. Alright, so now let's go for the next position. So this is white to play, and yeah, if you want to attempt this position, please pause the video here and resume once you are ready with the move. Now, see, we are at the 5th position of the outpost square. So, I'm pretty sure that by this time, all of you would have recognized the key outpost square in this position, that is the e5 square. What a great square actually. If we can get our knight there, it would restrict these rooks. It would put pressure on the king side. It would put pressure on the queen side. So, and yeah, just so many things that can be done. So see, it's important to dream. So because if you don't dream, then it will be difficult for us to achieve the things. So, but knight, all right, so good. Let's just play knight f3 and then knight e5. So simple. If only chess was so simple. So the problem here is that if knight f3, then this bishop takes f3. That bishop is keeping an eye on the f3 square. So for that reason, we need to be a bit creative. See, the idea that I'm about to show you, the plan that I'm about to show you, you would not play that unless you know about the outpost square. You identify the outpost square. Yeah, it will be a bit difficult to play. But once you identify that, and then you also recognize that the position, since it's a bit more on the close side, opponent is not threatening something immediate, then you can go for such plans. So here, one of such plans is to play knight b3. What's the plan? Knight c5, knight d3, knight e5. Now, by the way, it's very important to notice that after b6 doesn't work because black will lose the pawn. Then in this position after queen f6, just knight c5. The idea is to play knight d3, then knight e5. White will be putting pressure on the king side as well as the queen side. One of the plans after getting the knight to e5 would be to play a4, b4, b5, and then put pressure on the queen side. And also another thing is that once the knight reaches on e5, the activity that black would want to generate on the king side would be significantly hampered. So I hope with this discussion of these positions of the outpost, you got more perspective of what is an outpost square, how to create an outpost square, and how can you take advantage of such outpost square to put pressure on the opponent. So thank you very much for watching the video, and please provide your valuable feedback in comments. Lastly, don't forget to check chessneurons.com, your go-to platform for improving your positional chess. I'll see you in the next video.